Welcome to the Keen on Yoga podcast. This is a solo episode again. As you probably grasped by now, we're doing one guest episode per every other week. In other words, one by me and then one where I'm interviewing or chatting now to a guest. So if you have any recommendations or thoughts generally on who I haven't done or what you'd like to hear about, maybe you have a conversation in mind between two people, one of them being me, or even me and two other guests. Maybe you'd like to hear some subjects discussed with a number of guests together. And this is a new idea that I haven't really done yet, but it's possible now with the technology that we have. It's totally possible to get a couple of people on at a time. So that could be an idea as well. Let's get creative here. Other than that, what have I got to sell you? Nothing much. Just know that my intensive in Bali is coming up. So it's a comprehensive kind of overview of Ashtanga for all bodies, for all people. And with a kind of, I never say a slant to teaching, but for teachers, it's definitely relevant as well, because we will be going through the assistance, physical assistance, and how to get the most out of your students and how to make the practice accessible to all bodies and all people, which is at the end of the day, surely what we all want to do, right? If anyone wants to do Ashtanga, as I always say, all they need is to enjoy repetition, really, to appreciate the benefit of having a sequence and stick to a sequence, working methodically, and enjoy practice, but isn't kind of spontaneous every time. But other than that, there's no qualification. Come, enjoy it, and get the benefit. That's all there is to it, really. Anyway, let's crack on today, and the topic is trust and surrender. How much should we trust our teacher? How much should we surrender to our teacher, if at all? Let me try and extrapolate a little bit on this in the course of the next 20 minutes. It's a difficult topic because I don't think we should ever surrender our bodies to another person, to be quite honest. Trust we could talk about in a minute, but surrender is a little bit tricky. People will say, well, it's part of the process, surrendering our autonomy, like putting down our ego, surrendering ourselves to something greater. Now, this could be a personal project within the domain of the practice, right? Surrendering yourself to putting down your thoughts and your normal habitual processes within the practice to some degree, but not to another person. And we do still see this kind of talk in the Ashtanga community, right? You've got to surrender to the process, but often surrendering to the process means surrendering to the teacher. Yeah. And often it's all too quickly escalating or conflated with surrendering your ego. So it has this kind of insidious undertone. If you're not fully devoted to the practice, i.e. to the teacher, because often the two things are again mixed up, or you're not surrendering to their assistance, to their ideas, then, well, really, you're not really fully committed to the process, or you're just holding on with your ego. You're too egoic. That's where it is. You can't let go of your ego, and that's why you're not able to get these postures, right? So then there's this third conflation that surrendering is something to do with ability in asana, which is not. Right? A lot of this is just genetic. Let's be honest. You can get the most out of your body, and we don't know how far your body will go sustainably and comfortably, but nevertheless, many people will never get lotus just simply because of the way they're built, right? So this idea of surrendering and letting go of one's ego, and then that is immediately reflected in the practice and one's advanced nature or ability in practice is, I hate to say it, well, maybe you'll be pleased that I say it, a load of rubbish. And if you've ever been to Mysore, and I went for many years to what's now called the Sharat Joyce-Shala, then at the time it was called AYI or AYRI. Originally, it was called Ashtanga Yoga Research Institute, right? But when it had a name, originally they just called it the oldies there. Yeah, they just called it the yoga. They didn't even call it Ashtanga, right? Ashtanga came later, I believe, in the 90s, but no one's ever. I always kind of keep thinking when I talk to Eddie Stern to ask him exactly when this Ashtanga Yoga came about, because I think he would know the answer. But anyway, it's for another time. Maybe maybe you can put it in the comments. So there's this insidious narrative of getting rid of our ego, and it kind of involves these kind of words that we hear: devotion, surrender. And I worry about them, and I worry about the inherent tendency of human beings to control each other, which I hear about almost daily, unfortunately. The teachers have been kind of using this kind of terminology to make others do what they want, basically, because we seem to like it, right? We all like other people saying we're right, I think. And then the step further from that is, well, I'm right and do what I say, right? And at the end of the day, as long as someone's not injuring themselves and they're, being respectful to others and they're trying to follow on and practice in the best way they can, I think space should be given, right? And the idea that you've got to surrender to do what the teacher says, worrying because many people simply are unable to do what they say, right? I mean, and that feeds onto a post I did recently about inclusivity, right? You may be unable physically to do what the person says. They think you're just maybe not doing it because you're being willful, right? You literally can't do what they say, or it really feels bad for your body, but you feel if you don't surrender to them, you're not really, let's say, included in the group, right? You're not, your presence is not wanted, right? So you have to, because it's kind of cliquey, let's be honest. A lot of the yoga scene is kind of harsh and cliquey, right? I remember teaching in a place in London, a big yoga center. I was almost scared to walk in the door, right? I didn't feel welcome, and I was the teacher, you know? So it's made it, it often doesn't feel most welcoming, right? And then you feel like, well, you've got to do what they say. You've got to surrender, even if it doesn't feel comfortable. Surrender your own body autonomy. That, to me, alarm bells start ringing there, right? Yeah, surely. But nevertheless, this is said, and I think it really comes in this idea that, we have to surrender to the adjustment, right? So when I think, like, often I hear this kind of language being used, it's because often Ashtanga teachers are mainly teaching through giving physical adjustments. And when I say physical adjustments, I mean pushing people further than they can actually go themselves, right? I give physical assistance, as I often say. I still give physical assistance. That's the mainstay of my Mysore teaching still. A couple of words and a little physical touch. Yeah, but it's two fingers. Yeah, two fingers touch. I'm not pushing people into postures they can't do. Yeah, by exerting force against their bodies. Yep. Now you might say, well, I like that, and I'm happy to surrender the teacher's assistance, but I can't speak for that. Yeah, I can't speak. Everyone has different tastes there, I suppose. But nevertheless, my feeling is that this is not a good idea to surrender to another being's touch, because really, I mean, I speak for myself here, and maybe other Ashtanga teachers have learned something more than me. But I, after doing this for 25 years and teaching Mysore every day for at least 10 of them, I can't tell what's going inside people's bodies. Even a surgeon, can't until he actually cuts people open and says, "Well, actually, the MRI didn't show this." We can't know. Yeah, and even the most skillful yoga teachers, they can't really know with the implications of pushing on someone. If you push here, someone might be fine with it. You never know. It might give an opening. Some people say, "Oh, the adjustments have been really helpful. They've opened my body." Yeah, and who am I to disagree? If that's someone's experience, then that has to be valid. Yeah. Nevertheless, my feeling is you can't really know what they'll do. Right? So sort of surrender to another person as thinking that they know better than you do. This is the Ashtanga teacher or the yoga teacher. Yeah? To surrender to them as a student, bad idea, I think. Really bad idea, because honestly, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I can see certain ways of moving that I think, well, maybe you could move more effectively. That could be done in a way that might get more out of your body, or simply be more comfortable for you. Yeah. But I can't say, like, surrender to this adjustment, and even if it's painful, you'll get something better in the future, basically. I suppose that's the narrative in the end, isn't it? No, I mean, we just can't know that much to give a forceful adjustment on the body. As I said, not even a surgeon or has had looking at the MRIs can really know what's going on. Yeah. And even then, when, extrapolating further, really, but, God forbid you have some kind of surgical procedure, even then, if you read the stats, there's so many different recovery and situations there going on in terms of how people take that a particular procedure. Bottom line is, I think the human anatomy, human being, energy of the human being, right? Because it finally become down to saying there's something inside us that animates us. That's our energy, right? It goes when we die. Body's still here, but there's something that leaves, air energy. It's just utterly inexplicable and crazy and unfathomable to the rational mind, right? So there's the idea of the surrendering our autonomy to another being who apparently knows better. Don't believe it, because I don't believe the Ashtanga or the yoga teacher, not just the Ashtanga teacher, knows better to be able to do that, right? And nevertheless, no, even so, maybe we shouldn't be giving people allowing people to dictate on what is essentially the gift of space. I think I've mentioned this before. The yoga class situation, if it's done in the best way, I think it gives the valuable gift of space, right? We don't have almost any other place in our daily lives these days where we just have the space to be. Maybe we found it in a church previously, or you could go and sit in a church now. Maybe you find it in nature a little bit, but the space to be in an unjudged manner with other people at the same time, that's pretty profound, And then if someone's coming in the room, whether it be a lead class, that's kind of understandable because it has to be a bit more formulaic. But a MISO class as well, very prescriptive. Do it this way, or basically you're not welcome. Yeah. If you don't follow and devote and surrender to me as the teacher. So it's a tricky one because, again, as I say, if you don't have a little bit of authority as a teacher, then you'll end up with a class for people doing, often it starts one way and then it gradually, because I've been here as an overly soft teacher perhaps, that it starts, with someone putting in, oh, can I put in this? Can I put in the splits? Can I put in the handstands? Can I do a few of these postures at the later part of this series that I want to do? And you're like, well, it can't hurt, can it? Why not? Come on. And then they're doing it, and then someone else says, well, I'm going to do that. Well, and before you know it, everyone's doing kind of like, their own program. And, well, at the end of the day, that's fine. But there is a certain point in time when you need to learn the scales for music before you start freestyling. I think I've said before, I started freestyling as a classical guitar student way too early, when I should have really learnt those scales and that music, learning my classical guitar for a number more years, and then I would have been good. But of course, I was 13, wanted to play Guns N' Roses, and I just wanted to learn how the tunes worked, right? So there is a point when you go off and you got the skills, but there's also a point to learning them. And to that end, the Ashtanga, keeping to the certain method and certain formula, is very helpful for the teacher to know where people are in the room, because if everyone's doing their own thing, it's almost impossible to know what's going on. And secondly, it's important because people can, I think it's a useful teaching tool because people can grasp, they can do a self practice, but they can grasp a kind of method and doing the postures a lot. So they can understand how they're going to go. They can see progress. There's many reasons for sticking to a sequence, right? But at the end, what we're really looking for is to provide people the space to be. And oftentimes this over litigious, over rigid, overly authoritative way of presenting Ashtanga, where you have to surrender to the teacher's dogma and authority, not helpful, because we don't have a place in life often where we can just be ourselves without having to be something. And I think all too often now in the Mysore room, you have to be that Ashtanga student to be fitting in to the teachers and the group's dynamic. Yeah. And that's a shame, especially if you come someone like me who, I'm a white guy, as you probably know, but I had mental health challenges from young, and they manifested as depression and anxiety. And I reckon they kind of made me act, well, it's not like I had Asperger's exactly, but made me act kind of weird, basically, because I didn't feel normal. And I think in the yoga class, I didn't feel it easy to fit into a certain dynamic because of these kind of feelings I had inside, often very strong, very panicky. You kind of act weird when you're really panicky, very depressed, you don't act clearly either. Yeah. So, it's dear to my heart, this message of space, because I had the experience of not fitting in, I suppose. And then I also had the experience of going to all these different Mysores and just feeling like, well, I wanted space to practice and just experience myself and my emotions. And none of those teachers allowed me. They crowded me in. They made me do what they wanted me to do. And it just didn't allow me space to experiment, not experiment in terms of, freestyling, but just kind of a little bit of space, right? Without being all over me, do this, point that toe, grab that hand. No, that's wrong. Do like this, you see, I think there's a happy medium. Anyway, I've slightly got off piece, but you see this notion of surrender and devotion, it just kind of really does concern. And I think a lot of it is around this idea of adjustments, really, and surrendering to the adjustment. Surrendering to the teacher's adjustment is to put down your own ego. That, again, just should not be in the modern speak of yoga, right? I mean, I think we're not any longer in this idea of a guru disciple, guru shishya relationship where that might be relevant, where the yoga teacher is a guru, right? We need to have our rational faculties about us, I think, these days, because the yoga teacher isn't a guru, right? Like any other relationship. I mean, it is an unusual relationship, like I just said, because in the ideal situation, you don't have to you don't have to turn up in a particular way here. Yeah, in the yoga class, there should be a tolerance of allowing all individuals to go through their own process. Yeah. On the other hand, there is this sense of just crushing individuals and not allowing them to do that. And then also the idea that, well, they have to follow your instructions because you're some kind of guru they need to surrender to, and that will get rid of their ego. And I think, the situation in the yoga sphere is that we need to act rationally there, just like any other sphere. But I think because we have the idea that, the yoga is kind of mystical, it comes from India, but it's foreign to a lot of our cultures. It seems in a way more normal because we're already doing an unusual kind of unfamiliar kind of practice in an unfamiliar setting, to be honest, right? Like there's no other place where you practice with huffing and puffing people in a darkened room, right? So then there's this idea, well, maybe that is, maybe just surrendering, a lot of things don't seem kind of normal, but maybe that's part of it, and it kind of is part of it, being in that what's called a limbic space, a space of where our normal reality is suspended. But I think it's a subtle line, because that suspending normal reality and suspending our normal familiar ways of being, very helpful. It's the only way we can truly transform is to put down the old. And the space, the limbic space, the in-between space of the yoga class, which is a ritual space, like in many ways, right? You come in, you take your shoes off, you practice in special clothes, in a special way, with pictures and incense. It's a ritual, right? But nevertheless, completely suspending one's critical faculties and surrendering is still not a good idea. So perhaps there's a happy medium, because it's just gone too wrong too many times, and people have they've surrendered and let people push their bodies, and that hasn't gone well. I mean, I've heard so many occasions when it hasn't gone well, and to be honest, I never let anyone do that to me. If they did an adjustment and tried to push me, I kind of pushed back because I felt like it wasn't safe. Yeah, and you're right in feeling that it isn't safe, and it's not like, I'm maybe being too willful or egoic, or all this kind of idea. If I'm resisting a teacher's assistance, but you're right too, because this isn't the guru relationship anymore. We're in the modern paradigm, right? We shouldn't be surrendering our critical faculties and autonomy to someone anymore, right? We don't need an utter leap of faith. We want to work, if we're building trust, and now we get onto trust, if we're building trust, it has to be incremental, like any other relationship, right? Someone does something, like a teacher, like, me, for example, and when I taught Mysore, turns up every day, and you start to feel, well, that person is going to turn up for me every day, and we're going to have, we're going to go through this process, and they're going to be encouraging me and supporting me every day. So you start to build a bit of confidence that there's a person, whatever happening in life, and I felt this myself as a student, they're going to go there and they're going to be equanimous. They're going to be this calm presence, even if they're, of course, when none of us calm all the time, but we can turn up as a yoga teacher at least for a couple of hours a day, I'm sure, and be calm and equanimous, right? Hopefully. And so, the trust that someone is going to turn up for you, they're going to be calm, they're going to be kind, they're going to be supportive every day. You start to think, okay, they've done it for a month or so. Yeah, I've done it for a month. I've turned up for a month or so, and you start to think, well, maybe I can trust this person to be here for a while. And of course, I mean, even that trust could be breached. The teacher could say, well, I'm going off to Mysore for 3 months, or I'm going to open a program in San Jose or somewhere, right? I don't like this cold of London. Like me, I felt very responsible when I left London and my students. I mean, it was lockdown, but then I didn't come back again to the studio after that, and I had students that probably would have come back. Yeah. So, yeah, I felt a slight breach of trust there myself, to hand on heart. Yeah. But the trust that goes further, then they say, well, they are saying to try that thing, and I do it this way, for example, and you start, and I don't think, see, it builds up increments, right? And I don't want to do it that way, but nevertheless, this is the process I'm speaking out loud on the student's part, by the way. I don't want to do it that way, but nevertheless, they've said something else that helped. Yeah, it really helped. So maybe I'm going to try their way of doing that as well, even though that doesn't seem quite right, or like what I'm used to, or it's something new, something different. And I kind of like this way, right? So you can see how trust builds gradually, incrementally, like bit by bit, right? You have to get someone's trust somewhere, first of all, right? So I often have this question from teachers, in fact, like how, if people are doing what they want and they've been told, oh, so-and-so told me to do this and I like it, and, and you're the teacher there, but they're still coming to you, they won't listen to you. What do? They win their trust by giving them a suggestion where they want it. Yeah? If you can win someone's trust, in the way that they want it, first of all, right? Like they want to be helped with, the normal stuff, handstand, kapatasana, karundavasana, leg behind head. If you can safely give good instructions and a little bit of help, not yanking on a body, not pushing a body, but in with those things that someone wants help with, then you can start creep in and say this and that, and gradually build someone's trust. Like any other relationship, blind faith and surrender, and devotion in the modern world is not probably, in my opinion, to qualify, quite relevant to this situation. Although we are in a limbic space where we do have this unusual relationship with the teacher, an unusual relationship with the space where we don't have to be our normal familiar selves in a certain sense. And the teacher, often we don't know them well, so we don't have the normal kind of relationship where we have with the teacher, but we have with the person, sorry. We just have this gradual building up of trust, not verging on surrender. Anyway, so it builds up. Trust builds up, basically. Like, you wouldn't jump on someone in the street and start touching them all over. Well, similarly, also with trust and touch. Yeah, you might touch someone very gently, first of all, on the, just the peripheries, maybe their foot, their hand. Yeah. And then gradually, I'm not saying you never touch intimately anyone, in my opinion. Yeah. But, gradually you can build up a bit more trust in touch. Yeah. Not forcing either, but like anything, it builds slowly. Yeah. But it doesn't involve someone surrendering their body to another person. Right? Yes, change does involve letting something go to bring the new in, but that's a process that gradually happens from the inside out. No one can force you to do it, and I don't think, we're not that kind of person to be doing so, right? Over time and support. Listen, this is how I feel it should be. Over time and support, trusting someone's there, trusting they have your best intentions, trusting they've been there to support you for the period of time, you gradually feel the sense of just letting stuff go, letting your guard down a bit to let what comes in need to come in, and let what needs to be discarded, let go of, be discarded. But that's a process that happens within you, right? It's not like a confrontation. Someone comes up to you and you think, God, I've got to surrender to this adjustment. Otherwise I'm holding on, or otherwise, I won't change, like I want to change. And maybe if I surrender to that adjustment, then it'll kind of break me out of my old patterns. And again, I'm sure some of you listening think, well, that's my experience. That's really what happened to me. Like, I was super scared and they did something and I kind of overcome a fear. And that can happen. I'm not discarding that. And if I think back, probably it's happened to me somewhere down the line that I had a fear and someone helped me. But oftentimes it can also go the other way as well, that you have a fear and it's a reasonable fear because your body isn't open and you're dragged into a posture. And as you feared, it hurt, and it hurt you, and hopefully it didn't injure you bad, but maybe, at least it did cause you a little bit of pain. And then you feel really worried when the person comes to do it to you again, so it's a trick. And I'm never going to present just one side of the argument, because sometimes there's this process of trust and surrender, and it happened in Mysore a lot. I remember people speaking about that a lot with Shirachi in Mysore. They're trusting him, and he did have a good touch, especially for backbends. And when you trust another person, that is profound, especially if you've had a lot of your trust violated in life. That is profound, but that's especially then important to take that responsibility as a teacher seriously, and not violate someone's trust again in the yoga room by putting them into adjustment because they've, in inverted commas, surrendered to it, and yet again their trust has been breached because they've been hurt yet again. That's doubling down on a reason not to go that far. But of course it's nuanced. It's all the topics I ever talk of course, nuanced, because that's what makes them interesting, right? That's what makes them interesting. And so I try and present a basic argument and just more to think on, really. I'm not ever wanting to just give a conclusion my way, or the truth, right? This is something we can think about together. But ultimately there's this ambiguous term of space, the space to be ourselves, the space to process, the space to allow what needs to come up, the space to let go. And all that is possible with the teacher in the yoga room. But I think all too often in Ashtanga, it just is squashed. It's squashed and constricted because Ashtanga teachers feel they're not being authentic, being traditional, being a good representation of Ashtanga if they don't get people to follow the rules exactly. But I say the rules are like the wrapping paper. and what the real present is inside in the inner method of Ashtanga. It's not in whether you point this toe or catch this leg exactly, that's not the Ashtanga method, right? That's just the wrapping paper, right? So you'll still be a good teacher if you make the system appropriate and comfortable to each individual without them having to surrender to you. We should never allow our critical faculties down in this life. I think we have to keep our wits about us and keep reasoning. That doesn't mean we can't build up a sense of relaxation in the yoga room as well, a sense of being comfortable and trusting. Nevertheless, I think the question still comes: how far does this go? Right? I don't feel that commitment is the same as surrender. Yeah, I don't think the commitment to practice is the same as surrendering to a teacher. I don't think we should surrender to the practice either, because, well, it's just a method after all, and that method needs to be constantly critiqued. Is it working? Yeah, because not all of it works for every person all the time. And also it changes over the years. So it's just surrendering blindly to the practice, surrendering blindly to the teachers. Again, a bad idea, because it's practical. This is a practical method. It does work by creating pressure on the nerves of the spine through free diaphragmatic breathing, the two fundamental principles in my eyes of the inner Ashtanga method. Yep. But that needs to be constantly experimented with, right? Adjusted, tweaks to make it work for you as an individual. And so just blind faith, surrendering, just doing it, just practicing, practice, and all is coming kind of thing. Yep. That doesn't work. Yep. I mean, sometimes we just need a break. Sometimes we just need to surrender, let go, and just do it, because so much thought in our life, so much choices, so much mental confusion, so much emotional turmoil. We just need space and just doing it. Yeah. But that's a period of time. Hopefully you're not in that state all of your life. And if you are, then you've got to change something, right? But sometimes, and hopefully more times than less, you're able to think and use the method skillfully to get the most out of it, to get the most out of your body, to get the most out of the emotional cleansing that happens through moving the body skillfully. Yeah. And the sense of equanimity in the mind that happens when you balance, the equanimity in the mind through balancing opposing forces in the body. Yep. Which is different to just being pushed into a posture. That's not equanimity. That's just going into sensation. They're pushing you and you're feeling more and more sensation. That's kind of addiction to sensation. That's not yoga, which is looking for equanimity, right? And so if you're looking for equanimity in a stretch, that's a push-pull sensation. That's balancing opposing muscle groups. No one can push you into that. You have to do that yourself. So again, commitment to practice is commitment to thinking, to reflecting, to being open to changing it, to not being dogmatic, to being able to let go and think again, think twice, think 3 times. It's not the same as surrendering our critical faculties. I don't even think that perhaps it works sometimes for some people in an old-fashioned guru model, probably utter surrender. But I think even in the religions of old, there was a lot of questioning. If you look at Marpa and Milarepa of Tibetan Buddhism, right, and their relationship and the questioning that went on there, or if you look at Jesus and his own process of questioning, and how much the disciples questioned Jesus all the time. They were bothering him with questions. They didn't believe him, right? They were asking him like annoying questions. And then he was questioning himself as well. He went to the desert, didn't he? Yeah, and he had a crisis in the desert and he was taken up onto the mountain. Yeah. All these traditional religions have a process of questioning as well. They're not just surrender, And even remember when Jesus is on the cross, he's not surrendered to God. Even then he says, Father, why have you abandoned me? My favorite line of the Gospels, right? So blind faith, has it got a process? Perhaps in some camps in India, which are more along those lines, but generally not. Even in traditional religion, neither. Yeah, consistency isn't the same as faith either. Consistency in a practice, means constantly making it work. Yeah, and again, consistency is not the same as surrender either. So a sense of discrimination and reason has to be with us at all times. And I don't think it's contradictory. Okay, perhaps with the mind it's contradictory, but I don't think it's contradictory to say that we still have our rational faculties about us, but there's a sense of opening to a trusting process as well. And if the teacher can provide a space which is not hostile, which is not cliquey, which is not bound full of rules. I mean, so many of the Mysore programs, right? I've looked at some, I don't know how I've looked at some certain Mysore programs over the years when I've gone, I suppose. And before you even get there, there's a whole bunch of do's and don'ts. Like when you come to the practice, first days you have to watch. Then you have to do this, 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 before you even turn up, for God's sakes. Yep. And it's a shame because the Ashtanga method, I still believe it. I still believe it's a great method. Yeah. I mean, again, after all, it's just Hatha Yoga in the end. It's just Hatha Yoga packaged up in the Ashtanga style. Repetition being the basis of that, right? And certain sequences that kind of work for the process of teaching. But nevertheless, it's dominated by these rules and sometimes this, let's say, kind of negative kind of vibe about surrender and trust in the teacher. And I think trust is a two-way process, and it has to be won. It has to be won by the teacher. You can't just expect someone to trust you for no good reason. Yeah, you have to win their trust over a period of time. This is not the age of the guru, and it's not the age of the mystic martyr either, right? Martyr, or I hope it's not. You shouldn't have to martyr yourself to be respected by your group and respected by your teacher, and considered a true devoted Ashtangi. Although I don't like using that term. Yep, you should be tolerated to have your own process there. And if that's not the case, maybe think again about where you're going. Yeah? Because it can be taught in a way that is supportive. I still believe that, and that's why I'm speaking up and always do speak up for Ashtanga and for the system, because I think often people have this confusion about Ashtanga. Oh, it's the rules one. It's the hard one. It's the one where it's really strict, where the teacher's really strict. And some people want that. You say, well, I need that strictness. I need to be pushed. Yep. Well, that's not my thing anyway. And ultimately, I think that doesn't end well usually. Anyway, I'm rambling now. So I've said everything I need to say. So let it be that. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your feelings. And I hope to see you somewhere. I mean, I've not got much recently. I'm doing this from Goa in India. I've been teaching at Purple Valley for the last 2 weeks. Had a great time here. Probably return here next year again. But next on the agenda is a sold out Malaga one. So I can't invite you there. It's sold out this year. But we'll do it again in Spain next year, hopefully for Christmas. And maybe you come then. Otherwise, it's Bali. So I have a little bit of a break. But I'm always online. Always doing a Mysore online, Monday to Friday at 6 a.m. to 8:30 UK time. And I'd always love to see you online for a Mysore. Even if you haven't done online Ashtanga, give it a go once. You don't have to ever come back. No pressure. Even if you come and you don't like it and you switch off your camera and say, I'm going, no offense taken, right? Just give it a go. Because if you haven't tried it, you might like it. And people always say, oh, I never thought I'd like it online, but it actually works really well. And what I provide is some suggestions in a non-dogmatic, free space for you to practice and be with other people. Yeah, which is what I always wanted. So that's what I hope to provide. Anyway, hope you're well. Hope you're having a good week. And I'll see you soon, hopefully with another guest next week. All right. Bye for now.
Namo Namah Shri Siddhi